Hello again, and welcome back to Where Do We Go From Here with Scott Catello. In this episode, I have the distinct pleasure of interviewing my new friend, Michael Angelo Caruso. Now, to catch you up, I met Michael a little over a month ago at a Detroit Economic Club event, and I have to say I do enjoy doing these sort of networking events. The main reason is that I get to meet people like Michael, who I met and initially found that we share a lot of the same passions, but instead of me talking about Michael, I'll let him introduce himself and you can give your elevator speak.
How you doing, Scott?
Very well.
You said it was your did you say distinct pleasure or stink pleasure?
I'll let you pick, but the intention was distinct.
When we met, I felt a vibe immediately. Can't quite explain this kind of thing. I think we've talked about this before. It's like when you meet a long-lost brother or a kindred spirit. I think I told you, I can almost always tell if somebody's a musician. I don't know how, but just it's like those two fingers in E.T. that just come together. You just know you've met a match. It's a beautiful thing, don't you think?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's a pleasure to be with you today, and thank you very much. And let's see if we can entertain some folk.
I have a feeling we can.
I'm ready.
All right. So what is your background, Michael? Tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, sure. I'm a Michigan boy, born and raised, came up in Trenton, Michigan. I actually was born in Melvindale, Michigan, and I was there for the first 5 years of my life. For those of you in Michigan or the Midwest that understand the cities and such, when my dad moved our family to Trenton, he probably changed our trajectory because there's a vast socioeconomic difference between Melvindale and Trenton. And when you're getting started in life, you need all of the help you can get to climb that ladder. And I think my dad, in his own way, and my mom, when they moved us, man, they just changed the trajectory of where we were about to go. Grew up in the public school system, started playing musical instruments. I know we're going to talk about music today in the public schools, and then eventually figured out between my three brothers and I that we had a modicum of talent. We formed a band together, started going out on the circuit a bit, did some pretty cool things. So that was my first career in music. When the music career ended, which it does for, as you know, 95% of people that try to make a career of it, I got into sales, and I was doing almost the opposite of working in front of crowds. I was doing one-on-one telephone calls for a telecommunications company based in California, trying to sell piece parts to people I would never meet, piece parts for their telephone system.
Okay.
So it was the exact opposite, Scott, of being in front of an audience. It was a huge adjustment for me. I learned sales in that job because there's no better way to learn sales than to work in an environment where you don't have the access to nonverbal cues like head nods and blinking and smiling and those types of things. It's just you and the voice on the other end of the line. But I also learned that I missed people a lot. I needed to get back in front of people. And that brought about my third career. When my father died in 1996, I decided that I should really do something with my life that I really enjoyed. And I really started to think about how I could get back in front of people again. Probably not with music, but with what? And that's when I became a professional speaker. So I have 3 revenue streams now, which is speaking, publishing, which could be, any kind of writing really, but primarily books, and then consulting. I read a book not long ago by Dottie Walters. It was called Triple Income. And she's long gone now. The book is long gone, actually. But it was this idea that you could be a speaker, a writer, and a consultant, and those 3 revenue streams would cross-pollinate. And that's the model I've been working ever since. It's wonderful. And now, late here in my career, I'm helping other people do it, which is just a joy.
Yeah, and good for you for doing that. I think we'll start there because I recently learned that you have a book and you've written a book. And to me, that's just an amazing thing. I don't know how people get started doing that. I don't know how people end up doing it. So please discuss that.
Yeah, I've actually got several books. You may have seen an advert or a web page for one of them. But I did the Cool Ideas series for a while. I have a book called Work Hacks for those of you that want to go shopping and like to improve yourself. Work Hacks is a bunch of pre-approved tips on how to make your work easier, your job easier. A lot of, there's a lot of research that people aren't reading as much as they used to, or they're doing a different type of reading, Scott. So the accent is off of books these days and maybe to other things like a home study course or a blog or look at this. Well, we have audio podcast, which is essentially, I mean, if we get into any educational material, it's another form of learning. And I think it's in a way has substituted for people it's kind of augmented their reading habits, don't you?
Yeah, I think so. And as it relates to your work hacks book, which was interesting to me, not to turn this into a TED talk, but what what are some of what are some of the things the listeners should know, or what are some tidbits you could give the listeners from your book?
From the WorkX book? Yeah, sure. Well, one idea is with regard to relationships. I think a lot of people squander their relationships. There's an old saying, you can't create a good relationship when you need one. So what happens is we hang back. We think about people that go to cocktail parties and they wait for somebody else to come up to them to talk to them. And I always tell people, why do you do that? I mean, you're in control of how many people you meet at that party. Why don't you just get started? I'm meeting people in the parking lot on the way into the building. I mean, we're entering the building at the same time. I'm going to see you inside. I might as well say hi and introduce myself now. But it turns out that's weird. Nobody does this except me. And then,
Yeah.
I'll see you again in the coat room. I see you in the restroom. I see you in the line, the buffet. I see you in the line for the bar for drinks. I'll see you 5 or 6 times, but I got started early. In sales, it's called front loading the touches. You and I belong to the Detroit Economic Club. That's how we met. And I do the same thing at those events. I'm just shaking hands as soon as I come in. A lot of people are suspicious. They think I'm a politician or I'm running for office. Who is this guy? But I just find that when you front load the touches, you can get those relationships going. You not only meet and connect with more people, you speed up the relationship. And that's good. I mean, who doesn't need more friends?
Great advice. And I think that leads me to this next question. When we're talking about relationships and meeting with people, one thing I found lately, especially post-pandemic, is there's still, I'm finding a tendency for people to want to get together as opposed to how it was prior to the pandemic. Are you seeing that? And how are you, as a communicator, which you are a very good communicator, how do you see today with technology and post-pandemic people communicating?
I do think that the pandemic taught us how to use tech to save time and avoid. Here's another way. Save time sounds virtuous, but avoid meetings is non-virtuous because we need human touch. We need those social connections and we need socialization. There's a lot of research about the younger generation. Think about people that got caught in that little time trap of COVID. They were just coming out of school and starting their job. And so they missed all that water cooler time. And there's a lot of people that we taught accidentally. It was kind of like an unintended consequence of COVID that we don't have to go to work anymore. And that may be technically true. You don't need to go to work to do your job, but it is more nutritious for you as a person to be rubbing elbows with people, even if people are a pain in the ass.
No,
some people are.
Yes, they can be. We've been in business a long time. I always say you meet in probably any industry, you meet some of the best and some of the worst when you're in business of people.
Yeah. But that's a skill set. Learning how to cope with people who aren't like you is one of the things that is the nectar of life. But what happens when things get super convenient, which is what tech has done for us. Think about how we curse the heavens if it takes more than a fraction of a second to connect to a web page. This damn Wi-Fi,
Right.
I think that we're spoiled now by all this convenience, so we can't be troubled by things that give us pause or cause us a little bit of a hiccup or make us feel uncomfortable. lots of research and articles and news about this today, that people just don't want to be troubled in any way. So we've become super sensitive, right? We'd rather deal with bits and bytes and time increments and the automated robot chat line than actually talk to the IT person that's going to come and see us. And by the way, the IT person never wanted to talk to you.
Right. Right. On that point, are you seeing, because you're in sales, I'm a bit in sales, on the business development side, are you seeing more or less of a willingness for like your clients to get together in person?
Oh, I think less. I think that swath goes across the human spectrum. There are some hardcore socializers like me and possibly you. Like, we can't play music. We're both musicians. You more active than me right now. We can't play music and enjoy it really without a live audience, without people being around us. So there's something about our stripe that demands that we're out with people. I was out with another couple. Renee and I were out with another couple last night for dinner. I mean, that just makes my day. It's the highlight of my day, because I work at home at my desk, and I Zoom, of course, during the day with people, but people are really, really important to me. And I don't know that we're a large percentage of the population anymore. What percentage of the population do you think really needs and prefers to be with people? Certainly a bunch of salespeople, people in that trade, musicians. But what is it, Scott? 20%, 30%?
Prior to the pandemic, I think it was probably in the 70%, but
Okay.
like now, I think it's probably in the 30 something percent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we do without it, and then I think we do without it at our own peril. And I hope the pendulum's going to swing back the other way. I don't know what it will take exactly. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why we don't gravitate toward that kind of nectar. One is the political environment, which has become very polarized. So if you go to a barbecue, there's a risk somebody's going to start talking politics, and that just empties the room fast. Another one, I've been known to empty the room fast too, because people just talk off the top of their head, spreading stuff that they hear. And so my favorite question to ask at parties now is, what's your source?
Yeah, right.
Which also empties the room pretty quickly, because they make this like really bold statement about something, and I'll say, really, what's your source? Where did you hear that? And they say, I don't remember. Or they're embarrassed about the source, even worse. And now I caught them spreading misinformation,
Sure.
which is not my intention. I'm not trying to empty the room. I just don't, if you're going to tell me something that you think is important and I'm going to go tell other people, I want to know where the news came from. Because somebody might ask me what's your source, and then I have to say I heard it from somebody at a barbecue. You see,
right? And you're hoping their source isn't Instagram for their
right?
information.
Although there is some true stuff on Instagram, but
Sure,
most of it has been photoshopped.
Yeah, right. Well, that's good. It's switching the gears a little bit. One question I get, not often, but sometimes, is why did you start a podcast? So I'm going to take that question that I get sometimes, and I'm going to sort of transfer it to you and ask you what led you to start a podcast.
Well, I suppose at base level, I'm an attention whore.
but honest.
Well, who else would do that? I mean, you could disguise it and kind of cloak it by saying things like, well, I have a voice and I want to share, I want to share information. I think all those things are true for me. I found out later there were a lot of other benefits to having a podcast. My podcast, by the way, for orientation for you, and you know this already, but maybe your listeners don't know it. My podcast is a free platform. I'm not making any money directly off of it. I don't have any sponsors, at least yet. I just told you I'm a people person, man. I'll figure out anything I have to do. And I started my podcast during COVID when nobody would talk to me. So I started it out of necessity almost. I found out later it had some other utility for me. Like, for example, and this one just blows my mind. People won't answer my email, but they'll be a guest on my podcast.
Mm-hmm.
It gives me, I can't quite explain that. I can't speak for those other people, but there's something about being a guest on a podcast and holding court that appeals to them in a way that answering a simple email does not. And so it's a very symbiotic relationship. I want attention. I want to get you attention. And you like attention and you like my invitation. So we end up meeting on this podcast. And then here's the really strange one. That person does more stuff with me as a result. Sometimes they sign on as a client. I never invite them on the podcast so they become a client. But because we had all that dedicated time, we get to know each other. It's that forced conversation I was talking about earlier, where I just make you talk to me and ultimately maybe you appreciate me more as a person. Certainly if we've never talked before, I mean, hopefully you'll appreciate me more as a person and not less after spending an hour with me. My podcasts go an hour. That's a pre-booked session. There are people, I shouldn't say they go an hour. I tell them it's 25 minutes. If we're really vibrating, that's my line. If we're really vibrating, I may stay on longer with you, if that's okay. I get that pre-approval. And like you, they nod their heads. The drummer from Chicago, Wally Reyes Jr., stayed on with me for 2+ hours after I told him 20 minutes.
Wow.
So we had a vibe. And it was very entertaining and it was educational. You know, he's from Cuba, so he has all these geopolitical observations. He's played with Santana and all these people. And Chicago happens to be my favorite band, so we got into music quite a bit. So it was fun, you know. It was you can just tell when you have a role with somebody. And all of us that do podcasts are betting that that role that we have with that other person is going to be interesting to third parties. I assume that's why you do a podcast. You know that this conversation is going to be worthwhile to your buddies.
Yeah, sure. And I think you hit it on the head. I think people want to get interviewed, whether it's your clients or your friends or people that you're interested in. You know, they do it for either the platform to talk about something they're interested in or attention. I think you kind of nailed it.
Yeah. So I enjoy it. If you think about it like a brick wall, and you asked about my business earlier, thank you. If you think about a brick wall, the bricks and the mortar, the podcast for me is the mortar. It's not the main part of the wall. It's stuff I do to fill in and stay connected to folks. I don't even have a schedule where I have to do one every Tuesday. I just do it when I see interesting people online or meet interesting people. And then I'll say, you know, I just tell them that you're very interesting. Would you be interested in being a guest on my podcast? And you just see their face light. They either light up or you can tell they're going to put me off.
That reference was great because it was good advice and it was a great Pink Floyd reference. You gave with the bricks on the wall.
Touche.
I love it. I love it. So for those who don't know, so I've listened to a few of your episodes on YouTube and it's been great, but please let the listeners know where to find these episodes.
It's easily accessed through my website, which is michaelangelocaruso.com. I record in two ways, Scott. I record audio, which is quite literally the definition of a podcast. It's usually defined strictly as an audio presentation. But my videos get a lot more attention and a lot more views. Again, somebody told me recently, video has become more important than the spoken word. Not the spoken word, the written word.
Right.
And if you look at, I was just cross-referencing two major news platforms just this morning, because I do that just to have fun, you know. How does the same news story get presented in two different ways on Fox News versus CNN? Mm-hmm. I do this sometimes just for my own entertainment. Fox now is almost always thumbnails of videos, you know, because we just like watching video, even to get our news. We'd rather watch a video than digest an article. Remember what I said earlier about people not reading. So no surprise, my videos get more, video versions of my podcasts get more love. And you can watch those on YouTube. It's the Michael Angelo Caruso YouTube channel.
Fantastic. Yeah, I found now, like our marketing group, we're doing more video than actually written word these days. And to your point, I remember reading an article several months ago, and it centered around videos and really attention spans for social media and mostly like teens. The study that they did, which was fascinating to me, the study found that a typical teenager these days has an attention span of 8 seconds.
Wow.
like for videos and stuff like that. And they found that a typical goldfish has a 9-second attention span. And that blew my mind.
What's your source, Scott?
I have to go back and look it up. It was an article. I think it was in a like Psychology Today or something. But
Yeah.
I mean, that really blew my mind.
You think about, and you and I are around the same age, I think. When MTV came out, there was another advent in technology that made MTV more fun than it probably should have been, and that is the TV clicker.
Yeah.
Because if you didn't like what you were seeing on one of the, at the time, probably 50 channels, 50, you just click it, and your thumb was always on the clicker. It was in your right hand all the time. You had the beverage in your left hand, and you had the clicker in your right hand. Boom, 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 boom. Moving it along. And of course, MTV was calibrated like that. Songs coming at you at 3 minutes and 30 seconds. If you didn't like the 8-second introduction of that song, the thumb would be working again to click to another channel.
Right. Well, in my house, which again, I think we are close in age, in my house growing up, my father controlled the TV and the remote was me.
Oh, wow.
So whenever the channel needed to be changed, it was usually me that he would call to change the channel. That's kind of how it worked.
So you had to walk over to it to change it.
Yep.
You remember the TVs back then, that little cheap little plastic channel turner they would break, and then you'd have to use a pliers to turn the TV. Yep. We weren't poor growing up, but I remember that. Yes, about my upbringing. A lot of people think I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth because of how I roll now. Not true. We had patches on our clothes. We had to save on money. My mom did powdered milk for a while instead of real milk. Those barrel bags that you get at the grocery store. My mom would cut those down, and instead of a lunch bag that was tall and vertical, our lunch bags were wide and flat. Used to get teased all the time at school about that. But my parents had 4 boys born 15 months apart, and they were just doing the best they could to make ends meet. My mom didn't work. My dad worked overtime at 4 to try to make ends meet. He played trumpet in a dance band on the weekends. When I think back about how we got started, and you probably feel the same way. Most people probably feel the same way. It's just amazing we make it through this lifetime and actually do better than our parents. It's astounding.
Well, we hope to. And I think for you, I think one of your immense talents is the public speaking part. And, I circle back to that point because, there's that old study that was done where people were asked, what are they afraid of most? Yeah. And I think it's changed over, decades, but it used to be people were more afraid of public speaking than dying.
Yes.
Than death at one point, which is crazy. So, number one, what's your thought on that? And secondly, what techniques can you give listeners to kind of get over that?
Sure. Well, piggybacking the sensitivity piece, that we talked about a few minutes ago. When I grew up, and you probably remember the same, there was no phrase, "I'm not judging," or "no judgment here." We never said that when we were kids. That piece of language was not around yet. So judgment has just been like the last 10 or 20 years that not only am I fearful, the average person fearful of being judged, a person would make a disclaimer, "I'm not judging you," as a baseline for conversation. And I'm thinking to myself, what a bunch of crap that is. I use judgment every day. What kind of liar says that? I'm reading Daniel Pink's book right now on the power of regret. And his hypothesis at the beginning is that anyone that says they don't have any regrets is lying through their teeth. Because how can you live a life and make mistakes that you wouldn't want to do over? If you're married 3 times, tell me you don't want one of those chances back. If you went down an alley in the dark one night after coming out of the bar and got mugged, tell me you don't want to do over. So I think the same thing is true when you talk about judgment. We all judge. I mean, what's the difference between judgment and observation, for example? And the very act of standing in front of a room, in front of a bunch of people, is like inviting yourself to, in today's parlance, it's inviting yourself to judgment. In yesterday's parlance, it's inviting yourself to observation. You're being observed. But now it's judgment, which is harsher. Judgment has hair and teeth. Observation does not. And so because we have this kind of, that's the temperature of the water we're swimming in now, I think it's even harder for people to stand in front of a room and deliver. So business is good, Scott. People want help with this stuff. There is a little double-edged sword to it because a lot of people think they're pretty good at presenting, and they're not, but they think they are. So when they meet somebody like me and they go, yeah, I'm probably pretty good at presenting. And then I know this because when they hire on with me, I say, send me a video of you doing your thing. And the very person that told me they were pretty good, not so good, not in the professional realm. But pretty good is good enough for a lot of folks. What's that great line from Jim Collins' book, Good to Great? Good is the enemy of great. But I teach people to be great. So I'm not being critical of people that have a high opinion of their own presentation skills. I'm just trying to hold the standard for professionalism and for people that want to make money speaking, because if you're going to make money at it, you got to be really at the top of your game. I work with authors who have a book coming out, writers, maybe not, that's their form of expression, but speakers, maybe that's their backhand. Writing is their forehand, speaking is their backhand. And I help them improve their backhand.
Interesting. So I'm going to ask you, my son, he just finished his freshman year in college, and he had a public speaking class. For somebody who's 19 years old, what's the one piece of advice you would give him?
Well, everybody's different. And, I'd have to do a little bit of a study on your son to see exactly what advice would help him the most. But there are some things that seem to be applicable to most people and probably your son. I would start with this one. Most people don't smile enough when they're presenting. Now, I realize some presentations are of such dark matter that it would be inappropriate to smile, but it's a very small percentage of bad news. Like a surgeon, I think everything is a presentation. So a surgeon coming out of open heart surgery to inform the family that things didn't go so well, no smiling. Maybe some sort of a soft, it's good to see you smile, because there's different types of smiles. There's a 10-tooth smile, Scott, where you see 6 teeth on the top and 4 on the bottom. That's a pretty broad, that would be so inappropriate in most situations. And then there's that smile where you just turn up the corners of your mouth just a little bit, your eyes crinkle, But maybe when the surgeon comes out, there's no smile at all. My point is that in the front of a room, when your son is presenting to his own class, he should smile more. Because when you smile more, you become more human and you become more accessible and more believable to the audience. That's the number one thing a speaker should be seeking, is authenticity, which is ironic because standing in front of the room being judged is not a natural experience. It's unnatural. So we've created this kind of unnatural environment for speakers to become authentic. And that's the push-pull. Did that make sense to you?
Yeah, no, that's great advice. I think, especially for younger people, that's a good way to at least start out.
I mean, you can ask your son about it, but when he got in front of the class to do his thing, did he feel natural or did he feel like it was an unnatural thing? And if he says, it was weird, it was unnatural, there's your proof point. So you kind of have to fake it till you make it. And smiling is that activity that kind of can get you, it warms the water up a little bit and gets you to that place where you have a chance of being human and believable and authentic. Smiling. I also go to work on nonverbal cues. Smiling is nonverbal, but other nonverbal cues like gestures. I'll give you an easy one. If I'm going to say something to the audience like, I'm going to teach you 3 things today, I'll hold up my hand and show you 3 fingers. In the business, we call that congruency. The cynical people would say that can't possibly work. It's so cheesy. And yet it works like a charm because they're hearing it and they're seeing it. Not only that, but as the speaker, you're reinforcing what you're saying with body language. So there are a million examples of congruency, and that's the kind of thing that we go to work on when, I review client videos and try to help them up their game. I can help anybody be a better speaker, anybody. And sometimes we have such huge breakthroughs, they become new people. One guy told me, they give me testimonials, that tell me and other people what a good job, what a good program it is. It's called Present Like a Pro. And one guy said, Michael didn't just change the way I talk, he changed the way I walk. And I asked him about that. And he said, I don't think of myself the same. I have so much more confidence, because I'm able to express myself and I'm not fearful of that one thing, like you said, that scared me the most. Isn't that interesting?
That is great advice. And I like when you discuss the natural versus unnatural, because you give a lot of speeches, and I don't so much give speeches as I do presentations to clients, and
yes.
And there's a huge difference between being in a room of, either your peers or colleagues and presenting, or you're in front of people you don't know. So it gets back to that point of being observed or judged. And it depends on the room, right?
Yeah. Here's a tip for you, Mr. Presenter. A lot of times what we do in the presentation, we work against ourselves. So we say something and then we belie what we say. Like we counter it with what's called a tell. Most people know a tell from poker, that somebody's holding a really good hand and they do something to let you know, or they're holding a really bad hand and they do something physically to let you know. The one tell in speaker land is called the half step. And so you might be presenting an architecture, a blueprint to somebody or a design to somebody, and you're standing up because there's a small group of people and you're gesturing to the screen. And you say, we believe this is the best use of the space. And when you say, we believe this is the best use of the space, you take a small half step backward. You don't even know you do it. I've been with clients and I say, why did you do that? And they say, do what? I say, why did you take a step backward? I had stopped the video. And they go, I didn't see that. And I play it back and they go, son of a gun, I did. Why did I do that? They don't even know. And it's because they didn't believe it themselves. They didn't believe that was the best use of the space. In fact, they got outvoted with their peers when the design was coming together. So the opposite of that, of course, is the half step forward, which is almost like leaning into the, I can do it for you visually, but your podcast listeners wouldn't appreciate it. But you can imagine somebody just kind of just moving forward just a little bit when they say, we believe this is the best use of this space. It's
right.
Such a powerful, subtle, but powerful gesture.
Excellent. Good advice.
Go put that to use, man, in your next big preso.
I will. I am going to.
Some important projects. I'm so impressed with Nor.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. So we're going to dovetail the conversation to one of our favorite subjects, and it's not Italian food. It's actually going to be music. So number one, I know you had to have watched it, the concert for the Michigan Central train station. It kind of dovetails a little bit from our last conversation. We were talking about if the listener goes to Michael's podcast site and listens to it, they'll hear it. We were talking a lot about architecture and music, and boy, those two things combined on that one night. Yes. Did you get a chance to see that, and what did you think?
I saw bits of it. I did not attend the event. I guess they sold about 1,500 tickets, and people there were posting, and I saw splotches of it. So great lineup: Diana Ross, Eminem, the DSO, the Detroit Symphony Orchestra. Who else? There was another big headliner.
Jack White.
Jack White from White Stripes. So what they tried to do, I mean, clearly they had some big talent agency put all this stuff together, because this is not an easy pencil drawing. You have to deal with all those booking agents. You've got this really disparate group. Diana Ross's band cannot back Eminem, nor vice versa. And in fact, they had the DSO back Eminem, right, for a bit. So very clever how they put it together. And if they were trying to get clicks, man, the internet lit up.
Oh,
yeah. So proud. The Michigan, what's it called? Michigan Central?
Michigan Central train station. Yep.
Yeah. Was a long time coming. This was an eyesore in the city for decades. Photographers would go there to photograph blight. That If you needed blight, you'd go there. You'd have to trespass to do it because it was all fenced off. And finally, Ford Motor Company came in, spent all this money refurbing the building. You guys were involved with this?
We were, as our firm was not, no, on this particular project.
But I mean, world-class job. I have not seen the inside yet, but I hope to. And then to celebrate the grand opening, of course, you got to do something commensurate. Somebody told me one time, if you buy a new house, you should budget 20% of the value of the house for landscaping. That's
Oh,
a lot
wow.
of money in
Okay.
$1 million
Yeah, it is
house.
a lot of money.
$200,000 in shrubs, baby.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we purchased them. They're not cheap.
Yeah. And same thing with its grand opening. You know, if you spend, I don't know do you know what it costs to refurb the Michigan Central?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know
Let's say it
gross
costs,
amount.
let's say it costs 10 million. 20% would be 2 million. You'd spend 2 million on the grand opening. And I'm not saying that the analogy holds true, but they dropped some money on that event. Eminem did not perform for free.
No, I got to say, I did watch the whole thing, and I love Eminem. Certainly love Jack White, especially, me playing in Detroit a lot. Yeah. But man, Diana Ross just killed it. And I love Motown. If you're like if you're from this area in our age, you're a Motown person. And at 80 years old, I mean, she killed it.
So did she do songs in the original key? Do you know?
That I don't know. And I know where you're heading with that. That I don't know. But I was impressed.
By the way, that is not to diss anybody that gets to be 80 and can't sing in the original key.
Right.
I know a lot of purist musicians who like to hear it in the original key and they downgrade the performance if it's not. But the truth is, you get to be 80, to your point, the vocal cords are like I suppose a muscle or something. They don't perform at 80 like they did at 36. Your throat's been through a lot.
Yeah. But I don't think, going back to one of the things you mentioned earlier on the judging part, you can't judge somebody just for that, for getting older and then, still being able to sing at that level.
Yeah. A lot of people don't know that when songs are recorded initially, especially back in the arena rock days when you needed your tenor way up. I'm thinking of Steve Perry or Peter Cetera. In fact, back to Chicago. Mm-hmm. When Chicago got inducted into the Hall of Fame, they called Peter Cetera to see if he might want to join the band for that night, for the performance. And Peter, being Peter, had a bunch of conditions. And one of the conditions was that he had to change the key in the songs. He couldn't sing them anymore.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that was the deal breaker, but Chicago doesn't change the keys in their songs. They just swap out the singers. It may have been an important point for them.
Yeah.
I'm glad you enjoyed the concert, and I'm even more glad that Detroit showed so well. It made me so proud.
Yeah, it was. I agree. It was a proud moment if you're a Detroiter, for sure. So as we're closing out the episode here, I have to ask, what are some of your favorite bands right now, and what are you listening to?
Oh, great. So having been in the business for so long, I answer this question the same way I answer all those, what's your favorite? Like, what's your favorite color? Well, I don't have a favorite color. It's color combinations and it's textures at this stage in my life. I'm a little bit beyond black or blue, Same thing for favorite songs, because some songs just do it for me. Some songs are in my brainstem. Some songs are good mood songs. Some songs are melancholy. When I'm feeling like I want to reminisce a little bit, I put that music on. Same thing for bands. I like some bands for certain things. Elvis Costello has always been super interesting to me because of his versatility and because of the wide swath of his career, all the things that he's done. His project with Burt Bacharach just blew my mind. But he's not my favorite artist. If I had to pick one favorite band, it would probably be Chicago. It's interesting. They've come up a few times. People think that's all I listen to. But it was the first concert I went to way back. It was at Olympia Arena, which is long gone now in downtown Detroit. And to give you an idea of the acoustics, the Red Wings played hockey there before acoustics were even invented. So it was probably a terrible concert, but I loved how they play real instruments, and they're real musicians, and the songs are very textured and complicated. They're even the bass line, it's more than just an eighth note 80s rock pattern, you hear in so many songs. It's pretty sophisticated stuff.
No, it's a good one to like. Yeah,
that's a long answer.
I can't fault you for that one.
Long answer to your short question.
No, that was a good one. So as we close out the episode, first I can't thank you enough for being on this podcast.
My pleasure.
And very much appreciate your time and certainly advice. And before we close out, did you have any last words for the listener? Other than you and I have to get together and jam at some point. But aside from that.
We do. I'd love to. I got to find a bass, though.
I have one. You can use it.
Good to know.
Yeah.
No final words. Just, show the love, people. Stop being so judgmental and harsh. Life is short. Look up from your devices once in a while and talk to the people next to you and enjoy their company. I think this is what life is all about. And people are not trying to get you all the time. There's a very small percentage of bad actors out there. Funny anecdote as we say goodbye. When we were kids in the band, we used to get catcalled from the audience. And they catcalled almost the same thing everywhere we went. It was Skinnerd. Play
Freebird?
Skinnerd, right? But the irony was there were a lot more Lionel Richie fans in the audience. And nobody ever yelled, play Lionel Richie. So you think people are bad and edgy, and most people are just decent, and they're waiting for you to tap them on the shoulder and say, "Hey, I like your shirt, man. Where'd you get that?" So let's love each other more. How about that for parting words?
Well, that's good. I'm not going to do any better than that, Michael. So we're gonna leave it at that advice, which is good advice.
It was great being with you today.
Thank you, sir. Can't thank you enough, Michael, for your time and certainly insight on public speaking, communication, and of course, two of our favorite subjects, music and the city of Detroit. A big part of why I do this podcast is really to have the ability to meet and collaborate with people like Michael. So, Michael, I thank you one last time. To remind you again, Michael's podcast can be found on YouTube at Michael Angelo Caruso. And I highly recommend you check it out, as Michael has an amazing variety of guests as well as fantastic self-help advice. And the book that we briefly discussed during the episode can be found through his website at michaelangelocaruso.com. And to make it simple, you can get the spelling from the online posting for this podcast episode. As always, I appreciate your support for this podcast, Where Do We Go From Here? And if you're liking the content, you guessed it, subscribe, but also spread the word, tell your friends, and try to get them to subscribe as well. And I thank you for that. As I stated before and often, this podcast can be heard on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Amazon, and iHeartRadio. And now for the outro music. As many of you listeners already know by now, I create all the music for this podcast and generally create the music around my guests' requests. However, my new friend Michael selected the band Chicago, which is a great band, but come on, Michael, it's Chicago. They have like 20 people in the band. Therefore, since Michael, you reached back to mention in our conversation the Olympia, an iconic Detroit concert venue, I decided to hone in on the band Cream, who was incidentally the fourth band to play at the Olympia, following Elvis, the Beatles, and the Beach Boys. So in fairness, I decided to reach back into my archives to include my old band's version of Cream's Crossroads, for us, recorded live at the Bullfrog Bar in Redford Township in 2013. Till next time.
Going down the road. down.